looked up Tom Kendall's bio the other day, and one statistic jumped right off the page at me. At age 30, he just completed his 12th year of professional racing. Seems like I've known him since he was this high. He's a tall one, all right, but he's long on talent. Tom Kendall and the SCCA Trans Am Series were conceived the same year, and for much of this decade, whether it was behind the wheel of his ICI Chevy or the all-sport Ford, TK's fortunes and the series have traveled the same path. He is a man remarkably at peace with himself.
When I was racing for Chevrolet, Herb Fischel said to me, he said, there's nothing wrong with trying to be the best road racer there is. And I didn't want to hear anything about that then, but those words have kind of sunk in, and I realized all I can do is all I can do. I have aspirations to do both IndyCar and Winston Cup. Whether it happens or not, I'm actually comfortable. I just turned 30 years old. I'm still a young guy, but at the same time, I look back on what we've done, and I'm pretty proud of it. And if I never won another race, never did another thing, I'd have some, I wouldn't even call them regrets. You never accomplish, there's always that next goal to shoot for. But road racing, I enjoy it, and I've learned that that's as big a part of it is, you can go out to make money here or do that there, maybe make a better living, but you got to enjoy what you do, and I love road racing.
Tom has wisdom learned the hard way. In 1990, he won his first Trans Am title with Chevy's backing and was on the fast track to the big time. In 1991, he was in the IMSA GTP series with the Chevy Intrepid. Halfway into the season, something went horribly wrong.
I was dicing with Brabham, and then next thing I know, I'm backwards, and I saw the background was blurred, and I realized how fast I was going. I said, well, shoot, I'm going to hit something. I thought I was going to hit it backwards. I did, and I hit it head on. Came to rest, and the first thing I thought of, I tried to call him on the radio, say, I looked down, I saw my legs were not pointed the right way.
Right.
And called on the radio, said, I've broken my legs, send help as quick as you can. I tried to be calm. I said, try to keep my heart rate down and stay calm. And all this stuff was just, I thought of my family. I said, well, everyone watching on TV knows I'm okay because I took my helmet off. In fact, they didn't because of the angle.
Right.
There was some real tense moments there. I thought of my mom. I said, tell my mom I'm okay. She was at the race.
The truth was Tom had severe leg and foot injuries that required reconstructive surgery and a long convalescence. He learned some things about himself from that experience that have since shaped his life.
What I learned about myself really is just, how much toughness all of us have in us when we have to. You hear about the mom lifting the car off her child and so forth. You don't really know how deep you can go until you've had to do it, but that helps you from that point on. You can keep things in better perspective. It's not that bad, or I've been there before. It's worse, or when I need to call on those reserves mentally. It's all of us have kind of defining incidents in our life that make us who we are, and some of them aren't nearly as most of them, thank God, aren't nearly as dramatic as that, but. You learn bits about yourself, and that's one of the things when you have a younger brother, you try to impart your experience, and you try to save him some of the pain or the mistakes you made, and you realize that you've got to do it yourself. And but for me, I wouldn't trade it, because my life is my life, and if you got to take the good with the bad, and so I'm thankful that it turned out the way it did, and the strength thing is what you gain from it.
Lots of kids come up and say, God, I'm racing go-karts, or I'm running, these amateur cars or whatever, and geez, I just want a chance to race like you, Tom. Do you have time to talk to them when they come up to you? And is there any one thing any thread that you give them all when you talk to them about how to get where they want to go?
I always try to take time, because a lot of guys took time with me when I was asking the same questions. And the first thing I tell them, swear to God, is don't. I try to talk them out. I spend about 5 minutes trying to talk them out of it. And for all the reasons that you can do everything right, and I can give you a manual that, a 5-year plan, and you might never, ever get a single chance. And that's what's so cruel about the sport, no matter how good you are. On the other hand, after you've listened to that and you've heard all that, if you can't think about anything but doing it, and you've got to give it a try, experience go-karts is the way to get started. You got to get as much experience, because you've got to make those 10,000 mistakes, whether it's stretched over 15 years of club racing or 100 kart races in 1 year. You condense that. And then once you start getting experience, you need to blend the experience with exposure.
Right.
And I did a lot of different types of racing. I did GTU racing, but I also did some showroom stock racing. And all the guys I started out formula car racing with said, why are you doing that stuff? And I said, you know, balancing the experience and the exposure. The exposure where the manufacturers, tire and car manufacturers was critical to getting where I was. And I had an idea that it might eventually loop back around to whether it was Indy cars or somewhere else. And, you know, that's exactly what's happened in the last 5 or 6 years. A lot of guys, when people were looking for IndyCar drivers, they were coming out of GTP, and Pruitt came out of GTO. And so, you know, now there's some pretty good open wheel feeder series. So but you need to balance that. That's the next step. And just be ready for the opportunity when it comes. Don't say, I'll get in shape, I'll do all that stuff when I get a chance, because you might only get one chance.
Tom has gotten a second chance and has made the most of it. Without ever testing him a lap, Jack Roush put him behind the wheel of one of his Ford Mustangs and sicked him on the series in 1994. The team fell just short of the crown before scoring back-to-back titles in 95 and 96.
Motorsports Hour is brought to you by Genuine Chevrolet, the cars more champions trust.
By any measure, Tom Kendall had a pretty darn good year in 1996. He was fast qualifier more often than not, and he tied his cheap rival, Dorsey Schrader, for the most wins.
This year any more special, any less special than years gone by?
It's always a little suspect when people always say the most recent one is the most special, but in this case, the way it unfolded, DNFing 2 of the first 3 races and having to charge it back like we did was special in its own right, but then doing it against the guys we did it against. You know, I was trying to chase down Dorsey, you know, from the deficit we had, and he won 4 races in that time and finished every lap of every race for a long time. And so it's really hard to catch a guy doing that. But we put our head down and figured we'd look up with about 2 or 3 to go and hope we were back in the hunt, and we were.
You had to pick yourself up, though. I mean, boy, if there ever was a let's go get behind the 8 ball and start, you know what that's all about. And you've had seasons where you've had to make up a lot of ground. But 2 DNFs right off the bat, 0 points, so to speak. Tough deal.
Yeah, and it's not like Winston Cup where you've got 30 races to get back in the hunt. You know, you can count on everybody having 2 or 3 or 4 bad races there. Here, we weren't certain of that. And so it was good news, bad news. Bad news was after 3 races, we'd won 1 and DNF 2. Good news was we could have won all 3 in dominant fashion. And so I knew that the ingredients were there. Whether we were going to be able to put it all together and have it turn out like we thought it could, you know, remained to be seen. But, you know, the one thing was we had a tremendous amount of confidence because of all the ingredients that no one at that time really got desperate. We just said, oh, this is business as usual. And like I said, we'll look up with about 3 to go and hope we're in the hunt.
Certainly the DNFs would be the low of lows, but how about the high of highs in terms of the season? Was there one particular point where you really, you know, kind of touched yourself and went, this is great, this is maybe the best thing that's happened all year?
Well, there was 2. The first one was all our doing, and that was, you know, the Minneapolis race. It was a brand new street race, and we didn't lead the opening laps. Jim Losey got us on the start, but we were able to get by him pretty early on and pretty much controlled the race. And you know, that was a neat race. It was the Children's Grand Prix. They were able to give a couple $100,000 to charity. Everything there, everyone was on a real up that week, and the whole series was really trying to make a go of it. To come out of there, that put us 1 point ahead in the championship, so that was a high point. But then going to Dallas, who could have predicted it would turn out the way it did? Got spun around early in the race, looked like we were going to be out of it. All of a sudden, we ended up finishing 2nd, and Dorsey DNF. So talk about a swing. I mean, that was a pivotal race.
How good can Tom Kendall be? In other words, how far can he go in road racing? How many titles can he win? Well, as long as there's a fire there, who knows? And believe me, the fire burns hot in the lanky Californian.
You do anything enough and concentrate on 100% like I do, and you get better at it. But at the same time, I still know how hard it was to do what we did this year, so everybody else is getting better also. And it's there might be a slight diminishment in skills. I think at 30, I don't think I've started to see those yet, but you see these guys who are in their 50s that are so cagey and have so much experience. What they lose in speed, they make up in experience. And so I really feel like I'm at my prime because I've got, you know, a good 10, 11 years of top caliber racing, but I'm only 30 years old. And so I feel like I'm really in my prime and still highly motivated. I almost wonder where it can head because each championship I win, I want it that much more, and that can only lead to grief, because at some point you're going to have to say enough's enough. And but each one, instead of getting less hungry, I get more hungry, and so you know, just keep at it as long as I enjoy it. Indy
is important to you, isn't it? Whether you get there or you don't, it'll always be a big deal to you.
Oh yeah, I've grown up road racing, and IndyCar, you know, is at least half road racing. That's kind of always been the way I was heading. My size has kind of conspired against me there, where I like to believe if I was 5'8", I probably would have been in one a long time ago, or be in one right now. But again, that's something I can't do a whole lot about, and you know, I'll keep plugging away at it. I'm not obsessed with it like I once was. I believe I've proved to myself over the years that I can run with anybody. In the early years, I always sold myself short. When I was in GTU, I said I could never drive a 5-liter GTO car. And then when I got there, I said I could never drive a GTP car. Those guys are Supermen. So each step along the way, I've kind of realized that, you know, we're all human beings, and I feel like I can stack up, you know, well with anyone given the right opportunity. And so that's one of the main reasons I was obsessed with it before, is because I didn't know. And now that I know, I'm happy. When the opportunity comes along, I know I'd make the most of it.
Coming up, you'll never believe what Tom does to relax. There's nothing harder than to ask a person to look into the mirror and admit what he'd like to change about himself. But that's the question we posed to Trans Am champ Tom Kendall. His answer was quick in coming.
You have your, I don't want to call it your stage persona, but your race face, so to speak. And if I have a fault at racing, or being around the track and so forth, is I'm too intense, and that I can't separate out of the car from in the car, and you know, it translates into being a bad loser, stuff like that, where you just can't, like Dorsey, man, that guy, win or lose, he's a pleasure to be around, and I've really tried to work on that. And along those same lines, to be successful in this business, you've got to have a tremendous amount of belief in your abilities. And you always hear the conversation, cocky, arrogant, and you know, I'm sure amongst some of my competitors, I have that label. But at the same time, those aren't guys that I'm hanging out playing poker with. So you've got to keep that focus, and it doesn't mean you still try to be a decent human being.
Sure.
But away from racing, I don't have, you know, I don't dwell on the racing when I'm away from the racing. I try to live life like a normal guy.
What do you do when you go home to the missus and get away from the racetrack? How does Tommy Kendall unwind?
I enjoy doing a lot of things. You know, might ruin my image. I enjoy gardening and plants a lot.
Really?
I mean, the guys give me a hard time about it because I can name this flower, that tree, et cetera, et cetera. I enjoy that landscape, I guess you could call it. I like to relax, you know. I like to work hard, but I also like, you know, Jimmy Buffett, his whole things he sings about, just trying to blow off steam. When you're as intense at one thing, you need to also be able to blow off steam, and so.
So you go home, slip off to Margaritaville, plant a few turnips, and away we go. What got you interested in gardening? That's fascinating.
It's one of these things where you never paid 2 seconds attention to it. My mom, she'd always make me plant this and that, and you know, it was always just doing the chores. But when I bought my first house, all of a sudden you start noticing what's the difference. You say, well, why does that house look so much better than mine? Well, chance that Zara has something to do with the landscaping. So, and then I also enjoy the insides. My wife and I are, she's a phenomenal decorator. She doesn't do it for a living, but our houses are like show places. And so I actually enjoy doing that with her, going to the swap meets. Swap meets are a big deal in L.A.
Kendall's career path might seem a little backwards for a college graduate. Usually, someone uses the sheepskin to make a fortune in business and then go lose it in racing.
Now, to go to the complete opposite end of the spectrum, if you weren't a race car driver, if we said, sorry, Tom, that's not a choice anymore, what do you think you would be or would have been in this life at age 30?
No question, something, you know, business-related, you know, entrepreneurial, in the sense that I would have a tough time starting at a company and kind of working my way up, you know. Racing, it's in your hands, whether the glory or the failure, you have generally no one to blame it yourself, more or less. And so I like it that way. I want it to be in my control. I don't want to just be a little spoke in the wheel, you know. I want it to be win or lose, I had a lot to do with it and roll the dice, so to speak. So, I was an econ major in college, and the business community, Wall Street, et cetera, has always had a whole separate appeal to me, and I follow that world very closely as well.
But TK is a long way from storming Wall Street. His heroes are still men who strap on 4 wheels and go fast.
In addition to being a driver, I'm an incurable fan as well, and so Rick Mears was one of my early idols, and also helped me out a lot. He's the kind of guy that teaches you that you can still be a down-to-earth guy and be as good as they come, and so that's a pretty good lesson. Dale Earnhardt, guys that I've worked with, when I ran Dale's Busch car in 1990, you see a different side of the guy, and he really goes out of his way to help the young guys along, and then he kind of says, you're on your own. And the fans don't see a lot of that, and they're seeing more of it as he becomes more comfortable working, being around groups. He can't, let's face it, he's going to be the center of attention. And so, not to mention, talk about hungry. I'm 30 years old talking about I still want to do it bad. He's 44, 43. I don't know if he admits it even exactly where, but it's hard to question his desire.
How good does it make you feel that at any time, any Winston Cup car owner could be on the other end of a phone to you going, my driver stubbed his toe. I need somebody for Watkins Glen this weekend. What are you doing?
Hopefully the guy's not hurt seriously,
Sure.
You hate to get opportunities that way, but at the same time it makes me feel good that, even, like when Dale got hurt this year, obviously it was a Chevrolet and I couldn't do it, but, when I saw him at Watkins Glen, he said, yeah, you were the first name on everyone's lips, and that makes you feel good.
Always looking for a new challenge. Isn't that what keeps us all young? There are milestones in racing that are so coveted that fans and competitors alike almost have a fixation about them. NASCAR drivers flirted with 200 miles per hour before Buddy Baker became the first to crack that barrier at Talladega. In drag racing, the magic number was 300 miles per hour. And of course, Kenny Bernstein broke that door down in 1992. He's the unquestioned king of speed in NHRA's Top Fuel competition, and after a long road fraught with frustration and tragedy, he was back on top in 1996. When Kenny ran Funny Car, he was king. Needing a new challenge, he headed to Top Fuel in 1990. By his timetable, he should have been more than just a contender by the 95 season. Instead, he had the worst season since 1990 by going winless, and even worse, losing 8 times in the first round eliminations. Did you have any doubt in yourself at all? Finishing up 95 the way you did?
No, not with me. I still wanted to drive. I still enjoyed the competition. I still wanted to win, and I still got just as mad when I lost as I always did. And I knew that from my side of it, that was fine, but we were just mechanically not as good as the other teams because mainly of the chassis, the weight, as I said, and we certainly had even with Dale, if he'd been the only one there, we were still good enough to win with Dale by all means, but we didn't have the mechanical side under control in those 2 years. That's really what it boiled down to. And no matter how good a driver I was, or bad I was, or how good Dale was, or how bad Dale was on a given day, we weren't going to win like we're used to winning and being competitive with that program we had.
What decisions did you make over the winter time? What was the key decision, do you feel like? Can you put your finger on one certain thing that turned this team around this year?
Not really one, but there are 3 definite reasons for it. Number one, the chassis change to the McKinney Corporation car chassis from my good friend Al Swindle. It's just a much better race car for us. It transfers weight better, and we're able to give it more power and more clutch. And that's what was beating us out there the last 2 years. We had to standardize and go to what was winning championships. Scott Coletta won 2 world championships with those cars. So it had to be a superior product. We had to go to that. The loss of weight on the race car, we were very heavy in the 94-95 season, way over the minimum weight. We had to take off 110, 20 pounds off the car, and some of it off me. Not that I was heavy, but I had to give up some for it, because when you give up 100 pounds, you just can't recover it on any race car chassis. That's 2. And then the 3rd reason was Ray Alley coming aboard as Dale's assistant. A good friend of mine for 30 years, plus the fact he brought a lot of experience, and a good friend of Dale's. Between Dale, Ray, and Bob Brooks, that little threesome there really worked together and really had good thought processes to make better decisions. One guy can't do it anymore, and we've known that for years. That's why we were the first to have the dual guys in charge.
Back in 1995, Bernstein was in the process of divesting himself from his sports marketing businesses and other race teams. Kenny was aware of what some were saying, that he was spreading himself too thin.
Way back when, 85, 86, and 87, we won 4 world championships in a row with the Budweiser funny car, and I owned a NASCAR team and an IndyCar team during those years, and they forget that. They only, as anybody does, looks at the bad side and say, well, that's why you're not doing well, and that's not the case at all. No question about it. For me personally, being spread that thin was very hard and very difficult, but it had no effect on what the race car did in drag racing, what the Budweiser King car did there. We weren't mechanically in good shape in 94 and 95. It's just that simple. It doesn't matter whether I had a NASCAR team or an IndyCar team or didn't. It wouldn't have been any different. If that's all I had, it wouldn't have been any different. The only difference it might have been is I might have reacted a little quicker to the problem, to the solution, and helped get that arranged a lot quicker than waiting 2 years. But it's hard to, it's always easy to second guess and look back 2020. But at this time, just for me and for me personally, to enjoy this year as much as I have because I didn't have the obligations in the other arenas has been great. When I finally got to the NASCAR side, which I really enjoyed, number one, I really knew it was a tremendous, great amount of exposure over there and opportunities. I loved a lot of the people there, great friends still to this day. And that was the hard one to sell. But when I made the decision to do it, I really felt a relief, tremendous relief. And then when it was finally done, and on November the 15th of a year ago, Cheryl and I got on a plane and walked out of Charlotte, North Carolina with a check in our hands, in our pocket basically, from the sale of the property and all the auction stuff that we had done. Boy, I felt great. I felt wonderful, and I never looked back, and I feel good about it.
Whether by careful design or just coincidence, the Budweiser King team had already improved on the entire 1995 season by the second stop in 1996, when Kenny won in Phoenix and set the then all-time quickest ET. But with the exception of John Force, racing seasons are inevitably a roller coaster with peaks and valleys. The challenge is always making the valleys as small as possible.
We really felt good about it at the start of the season when we won the first 2 out of the 4. We knew we were capable then. But then I think there was a little bit of question marks in the middle of the season when we didn't qualify at Atlanta, of all things. I mean, there's never before been someone win a championship and missed qualifying for an entire event. So we had some questions at that time. Are we going to grab it back and get to it? But boy, starting at Sears Point, California in July, from that race on, there was no question that we were going to be tough to contend with, and we had a shot at it. We just finally gelled it back together, kind of got where we were at the start of the season, back in line, and really started coming on strong there. And that's when we really had a really good racing program from that point on.
As his multiple championships attest, Kenny Bernstein has the ability to adapt to changing track conditions and whatever the competition is throwing at him. But you'll never hear him brag.
If there's any one single thing about you, Kenny, that's made you so good at drag racing, what do you think that might be?
No, first thing has to be Dale Armstrong, my crew chief. I mean, without Dale in the last 15 years turning the wrenches and making the decisions and giving us that awesome power to run those kind of speeds and win races, it doesn't happen. And without me having a sponsorship like the Buds and the Mac Tools and the Prolongs and the Hooters, these people to put money in to be able to allow Dale to function, then he wouldn't have been so successful. It's a tremendous partnership, really, but I owe everything that I've accomplished to Dale Armstrong and the team because they really make it happen.
Well, sometimes I wish I could grab you and go, oh, wait a minute, Kenny. Somebody had to know how to put this package together. Wouldn't you say that's just one of the strongest things you do is understand packaging?
Well, I hope so. I think it is that way. And a lot of times you can't get the package and all the ribbon on it exactly right like you want. But you certainly have to surround yourself with really talented people and people that are loyal, that want to win as badly as you do. And then, yes, you have to drive the race car. You certainly have to do what's right. As good as Dale is, if I wasn't an adequate driver, then we wouldn't win either. But in all reality, my feelings still are very strong that Dale Armstrong is what's made our package come to life. Yes, it's a partnership. We help each other in both ways. We're good for each other in a lot of ways. But the package is good in its entirety. And, of course, now with Ray Alley and Bob Brooks aboard, I think it's even a better package.
Anyone who has spent time around Kenny at an NHRA Nationals event knows that sometimes the personable Texan undergoes a transformation.
Oh yeah, he can get very intense, especially obviously on race day, and you see it much more when the car's running good and you know you got a shot of winning. I mean, the intensity really comes out then.
Coming away from there at sometimes has being too competitive been a problem.
Well, it is for people around me. It is for that. Poor Cheryl, she has to put up with the bad side and everything. Yeah, I think sometimes I wish that I didn't take the losing and not being competitive on a given weekend as badly as I do, and I've done better at it. But at the same time, I think the older you get, the more you want to win. When you're a kid, you're just having fun. When you get a little older and it's a business, I mean, it's really down to the brass tacks. You gotta perform. The sponsors expect that, they want you to. And if you have any kind of a determination or carrying part of your body of taking money from some sponsor and not giving something back, then you're going to want to win and give them something back for their investment besides the fact that you help sell their products. So sometimes I look up and say, boy, I wish I wasn't quite as competitive and could take losing a little easier. And then I get down to reality, and I look at it and I say, it's real simple. You show me a guy that's happy losing, I'll show you somebody that's never won.
How does Kenny Bernstein relax these days?
Well, it's the same thing you laughed about earlier, but I really enjoy golf, as you know, yeah. and I've taken it up now for the last couple of years, 2.5 years or so. I'm getting to a point where I can enjoy it a little bit and not be so competitive or upset when I don't do well. I understand the game is a lot like racing because it gives you good days and bad ones, by all means. The Harleys, I still enjoy that. Cheryl and I, and even, you know, Perdome and Lynn, we take a lot of trips through the year, 2 or 3 times long, 1,000-milers, and it's a really blast to go out on those and just take 4 or 5 days to go somewhere. So that's enjoyable. And believe it or not, I've kind of like we did the businesses where we've unloaded all the businesses down to one. I've kind of reduced my program back down into one area where I like to stay most of the time, and it's made just going back home, for instance, in the winter to California and spending the winter months there is kind of nice to relax. So I've really had a lot of things to do that's given me good times now, and I had time to do it.
When we come back, Kenny's heroes in racing. On previous shows, we've always been curious about what our champions would have done with their lives if they couldn't drive for a living. In Kenny Bernstein's case, that's a tough question because he's had other very successful businesses.
I have done a lot of things other than drag racing. You know, I've had 3 or 4 businesses that have nothing to do with drag racing or racing at all, and fortunately they've been successful, again, because of the great people that we were able to put together. The towing business in Dallas, Texas, back in the 70s, the restaurant business in the late 70s and the first of 1980. Those were successful, and I'm not so sure that I would have stayed in the restaurant business if I hadn't have got the opportunity with Budweiser to come back in 1980, but more than likely I would have, and instead of maybe 20 locations, there might be 120 today. But at the same time, my heart was always back with racing, and when I got the opportunity the Budweiser gave us to come back to drag racing and do it in a manner in which you had a chance to compete and be winners that way, then boy, I jumped at it. It didn't take much to get me convinced to go try it again.
Who's Kenny Bernstein's heroes?
You know, it's kind of funny, but when I grew up in West Texas and I was a youngster, and California was the hotbed for drag racing, obviously, and we read about those guys out there, and really we read about Tom McEwen and Don Perdome and Don Garlitz and Chris Karamessinis, and all those guys were our heroes when we were teenagers, you know, because they got to do what we wanted to do. So in one aspect, I look back and see all those guys, and they're the heroes that I had because they kind of inspired me in Lubbock, Texas, to think that someday maybe I could do that. And then luckily later I got to race those guys all the time, and so the side of it that was a hero kind of came down to a level, well, I got to beat these guys if I can now. So they were heroes and inspiration at the same time. They become all good friends, and now we're good friends and competitors with each other all the time.
So once again, this dreamer from a West Texas town is back atop the heap. Can he stay on top by himself? In other words,
it appears again that you may get faced with the multi-car deal, because it certainly seems like everybody's running off in that direction. A top fuel, funny car, and pro stock. I mean, Is that the wave of the future, that a team, so to speak, ends up being all three major pro categories, not to take anything away from alcohol categories or anything like that?
When you have success, then the sponsors want to be with you, so they force you into possibly having those multi-car teams. And I think we're going to see more of it, as we have. John Force, and of course, Perdome's coming in with a funny car this year, and you've got the Western Auto situation with 2 or 3 teams over there. Yeah, I think you'll see more of it. The answer you're going to ask me next, are you going to do it? The answer is I have no plans at this time. I've been down that road. It would be easier in drag racing because you'd be in one location. You're going to be there anywhere. But I'm not excited about expansion right now because of what I've been through the 10 years that I was with the 3 different teams. You've been with me that long. You know how tough it is to do that. So I'm not out soliciting or looking for it. But like Armstrong told me the other day, he says, yeah, wait till somebody calls you up and offers you a whole bunch of money, and then the whole thought process will change. Maybe it will, maybe it won't.
As is often the case when fans and TV viewers get a brief glimpse of someone, they pass judgments about their favorite athletes, either good or bad. Kenny's rapport with fans, the media, and sponsors is a benchmark for others to copy. He would hope we'd keep something else in mind when we think of him.
I think the most important thing is that they remember that I was ethical, honest, and straightforward. No gray areas, no question marks. You knew right where you stood with Kenny Bernstein and where it was, and that's the best thing that I could give them, because I like definites. I don't like question marks, and I don't like to guess what should be or shouldn't be. And I try to run the business that way. I try to run all the people that work for me. They know where they stand all the time. If they got a question, we sit and talk about it. And I think that's the most important thing, is the honesty and the ethical side of things, that you do it right. You don't do it in any gray area.
Racing at the highest levels is a business, and Kenny Bernstein has it figured out as good as anyone. IndyCar-style racing was turned upside down in 1996 as the CART IndyCar Series and the upstart Indy Racing League skirmished all year. The unfortunate fallout from the test of wills between the two camps was that it drew attention away from the competition on the track. Because of that, a lot of people may not know much about the reigning IndyCar champion, Jimmy Vasser. Let's fix all that right now. High-tech, fast speed, big dollars. That's what it takes to be a player in the CART Series. Oh, you've got to have a heck of a driver, too. The Chip Ganassi-owned Target Racing team welded all these elements together in 1996 to claim its first championship. The most visible representative of the team was, of course, driver Jimmy Vasser. The title was a unique feeling for several reasons.
I've been racing a long time in my life, since I was 6. And a lot of times in junior Formula Atlantics or Formula Ford 2000, and we really ran good and won a lot of races, had a lot of poles, but always seemed to miss the championship for one reason or another. So championships have been something that kind of always eluded me along the line. They just haven't always come. So this one was very, very sweet in that I was able to finally become champion in one of the series that I was running in, and for it to happen in IndyCars, where against all the guys that you kind of grow up idolizing, Ray Hall and Michael and Al Jr., Fittipaldi, these names, and it was a very fantastic, very rewarding feeling.
Also a very busy feeling. We'd been trying to get some quality time with the Californian for 4 months before there was a hole in his calendar. We hooked up with him at the open test session at the Metro-Dade Homestead Motorsports Complex in late January. The sights and sounds of his crew busy at work in the background seemed an appropriate framing to our chat.
All of us who race can trace back all the people along the way that you thought to yourself at that time, well, maybe they'll be a part of this thing I'm building here. Have you thought back to all those people along the way who really helped Jimmy Vasser get to this point?
Absolutely, and I try as best I can to keep in contact with them all, because I realize, nobody can do it on their own. Everybody needs a little help along the way. And in my case, I got a lot of help. And it started with my father. He was really the motorsport enthusiast in our family. Started racing quarter midgets when I was 6, and he was a racer through and through. I probably wouldn't be a racer if it wasn't for him. And you know, we just raced together. It was something we really enjoyed. And, you know, I'm afraid to start naming people because I'm afraid to leave somebody out that was just as important as everybody else. But I had a lot of, every time it seemed like when the chips were down for Jimmy Vasser, and you know, we didn't have a lot of family money, and the ride wasn't really around the corner, somebody would step up and say, hey, you know, I want you to drive my race car. And it wasn't about money or anything like that. I've been fortunate that I've been working with racers in my life, and they weren't really interested in the big checks. They just wanted to win races, and that helped, you know, mold me to the type of racer that I am today.
Vasser and Ganassi teamed up at the beginning of the 1995 season and actually were credited with the Portland win when Al Unser Jr.'s car was penalized for a chassis infraction. Upon appeal, Penske Racing was awarded the win, and Vasser was dropped to second. Jimmy's 1996 started with a bang with a win at Homestead.
Nothing will ever be the same as that first time you got the checkered flag. Was that complete validation of Jimmy Vasser?
Well, after what happened in '95 at Portland, where, you know, Junior won the race and we came second, and then he didn't make it through tech, and then they said Jimmy Vasser won his first race, and when it didn't really feel like it because you didn't take the checkered flag, you know, then I was a winner all the season long, and then they took it back, they gave it back to Al, which didn't bother me because that's not the way you want to win races. But taking the checkered flag at Homestead last year and in the right fashion really was the way we wanted to do it, and it really felt good for the whole team.
The Holy Trinity in kart IndyCar in 1996 was Honda Power, Reynard Chassis, and Firestone Grip. Those were punches that Jimmy landed early and often.
You guys didn't just come out of the box smoking. You blew the entire box up last year in the way you started the season. I mean, it just sometimes it happens. Is that the best answer?
Well, you know, it's yeah, I guess you know, winning all the races in a row like that, or 4 out of the first 6, might have been coincidental because we were in a position to win some races late in the year and just didn't do it. I mean, but we were consistent, you know. But you have to give some of the credit to the people that we're working with. Honda, the engines are fantastic. Firestone, the tires are great. Reynard chassis been good. We got a good combination, good package. And again, these guys back here working on this car, they're all top notch, and they want to win races, and they all get along. You got to have that chemistry. So, you know, we got a good thing going on around here, and you know, I don't see any reason why we can't do similar things this year.
Ah, and there's the rub. You've got the carrot, and all the other hungry rabbits want. As a champion, Jimmy Vasser has been thrust into the spotlight in ways he might never have imagined just 1 year before. Jimmy, how about posing with other active IndyCar champions? You can see it's a very select and notable club. The architect and patriarch of the Target team and Vasser's success is car owner Chip Ganassi, himself a former driver.
What did Chip Ganassi, the racer, like about what you saw him do on the racetrack last year?
He can control his temperament, Pat. He's real good at in other words, if he's got the car to run to the front, he'll run to the front with it. If he's got a second-place car, he'll shoot for first, but eventually he'll figure out that he's got a second-place car and he'll bring it home second. He won't put it in the fence. So, you know, that's a big thing for a car owner. He knows his limits. He knows the limits of the car. And as a racer, I mean, he knows when he can win, and when he can't, he's going to bring home some points.
Ganassi says one thing he really likes about you is that you really acquired some patience. In other words, when to race, when to lay back a little, and so forth. Is that something that's mentally with you, you know, or do you need that prompting from the pit sometime to go, you know, hey, Jimmy, you know, cool it just a little and remember to save this, that, or the other? You're doing it better for yourself these days.
I think I do it more from the seat, you know. I get a lot of support from the radio too, but you know, I've told the story before. I mean, early in my career, I wasn't finishing. I didn't have a good finishing percentage, and Rick Gallis, who helped, you know, bring me on up along with Hayhoe, and he said, man, you gotta finish 80% of your races. Some of that can be the engine blowing up or whatever, but if somehow you're not finishing 80% of your races, you got a big problem, and you're not gonna win the championship. And really, I wouldn't look at you as a driver if you couldn't finish the races in a high percentage. So, I started working out the math, and man, my percentage was low. And some of it was because of me. So I started to concentrate. This is about 1993, beginning of 93. I started to try to concentrate on bringing the car home, and it got a little bit better every year, a little bit better every year. And I tried to minimize me making the mistake to not bring the car home. You know, nothing you can do about the race car. You know, if the engine or gearbox or something goes. But to minimize it as a driver, and so I guess that kind of goes into my approach during the race. You know, if I got a good race car and I can win the race, and I'm going to win the race. But if I don't, then I'm going to do what it takes to bring it home the best possible position that I can. You know, and that might be, you know, instead of trying to take some bonsai pass, just hanging in there, see what happens.
Were you a little nervous the first few races, not knowing if the package itself was going to work? I mean, Honda's kind of new, and this is kind of new.
I wasn't nervous. We had a lot of good tests before the season, you know. A lot of successful tests. We were quickest, you know, on a lot of tests that we went to in the beginning of '96. So I knew we had a good race car, and the team was confident, and we just wanted to focus on the things I've been talking about, you know, bringing the race car home and winning the race when we can, and doing the best we can when we don't have the race car to win that race. And you know, it's all you can do is the best you can do, and as long as you do that, and don't get down on yourself. You know, if you didn't win the race, you can't get down on yourself because you know, it might affect your next event. So just go out and do your best.
On the path to their first championship, Jimmy and Chip ran into some fairly big speed bumps, like crashing on the green at the US 500. But rather than recalling that ugly moment, the driver prefers to remember winning that race in his backup car.
Well, I had a lot of confidence in my guys. You know, they told me the car was close, but you know, you still had to getting out. I hadn't run it in 3 weeks, and we had to get in the thing and put your foot down and hold it down and doing it in turn one with a green flag. You know, at the start of that race, and it wasn't the best car in the race. We backed up. I mean, we worked with it all day long. We worked with it, and we worked with it, and we changed it. And by the end of the race, we were running 233s, 232s, running real quick, and we were there. And it was just you know, that was a great feat from my team to have that thing sitting out there ready to go. A lot of teams didn't even have their backup cars ready, or they had taken parts off it to use for a spare part for the other car. But my guys were ready, and you got to give them, you know, all the credit for that race.
But in the end, Jimmy had done his job, and the brass ring was his.
Were you the best in that car last year that you've ever been? I mean, in your life in racing?
I think I was, yeah. I think, you know, I was champion. So, you know, I had never done that before. And, you know, we brought the car home all 16 events. And I've learned and I've grown with this race team to become a better race car driver. And I think you're always going to grow and become a better driver. So I believe I was the best, but I hope to be better this year.
When we come back, a champion's heroes and thoughts on defending his title.
Motorsports Hour is brought to you by Genuine Chevrolet, the cars more champions trust.
To understand kart IndyCar champion Jimmy Vasser, you need to know who his idols are, the kind of people he has either consciously or subconsciously tried to emulate.
Mario was a big hero. Rick Mears, Bobby Rahal. I don't want to make him feel like he's an old man, you know, but you know, he was a hero of mine before I had a driver's license. And you know, and then to be able to drive with those guys. When I first went on the track, and you know, you come out in the pits, and you're in your, you know, I was in my year-old car, and they didn't know who I was, right? And there goes Rick Mears cruising by, warming up his tires, and then Mario or Emerson and Bobby Rahal, you know, Allenson Jr. It was pretty neat. But then after a while, you know, the shine kind of goes off, and then, you know, there are times when you kind of get mad at them, too, because they cut you off or anything like that. But, you know, to go back to your question, you know, I think Rick Mears is a class act, and Bobby Rahal and Mario Andretti. Those are the guys that I grew up watching IndyCars on TV.
And now he gets to do something he's never done before, defend a title.
There isn't any more pressure. You can't put any more pressure on me than I put on myself to do a good job and to keep my job in the race car. I'm pretty calm along those lines. And I do like to be champion, because what's the alternative? Yeah. Not being champion? So, hey, you know, we're out here to win championships, and hopefully we can do it again. But I don't think there's any more pressure, and You know, it doesn't put any harder work on us. We're just going to put our head down, give 110% and work hard and try to do the same things we did last year, maybe a few more.
The discoveries that you make in winning a championship are obviously invaluable tools. What did you pick up from '96 that you fully intend to operate with this year?
Well, it was something I hadn't experienced before. You know, I basically led the championship the whole season long, and we had a lot of firsts. I won my first race. We had my first pole position. First time I was in the position leading the championship. So, you know, I like to think that we learn an awful lot that should help us this year if we find ourselves in the same situation. And you know, you just have to experience those things to learn those things. And now that we have, and not just me, but my race team, you know, and they stayed cool. We all stayed cool under pressure, you know. Through the middle of the season, it was tough, and we had to keep our heads. You know, we had to stay on top, but we couldn't let down. We had to keep finishing races and getting whatever points we could, and we learned an awful lot through that.
All Jimmy has to do is look at the next pit space to see where his greatest challenge may come from. Teammate Alex Zanardi.
Teammates used to be a real bad thing in racing, and it seems like these days it certainly is the thing everybody's working with. You and Alex seemed to work really good last year. Was it as smooth as it appeared to be, and did you really lean on each other?
Sure. I mean, well, to answer your question, it was smooth. You know, I mean, I like to think I'm an easy guy to get along with. I'm not too concerned if he's quicker than I am. I go out and do my best. That's all I can do. And on the other side of the coin, I think, you know, when I have success, he's happy for me too. So, you know, we work well together, trying to make the race car better, and then we go out on Sunday and we go racing against each other.
I'm Pat Patterson. We'll see you next time for another Champions of Speed.